Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are Ray Olson, Family Financial Planning. Today we will be doing a webinar on Social Security. A few of the topics we will go over is how your benefits are calculated, timing of your benefits, spousal benefits, taxability, as well as the current state of Social Security and potential changes. Cooper Casillas has a lot of information on Social Security. So if there is a topic that we missed today that you are interested in, feel free to reach out to us. And he is more than welcome to go over that with you. But I am going to turn it over to Cooper. So Cooper, go ahead and get started when you're ready.
What we've done is we've kind of prepared about 30 or so minutes for material. Today's topic is a topic that we get a lot of questions on. And so we thought it would be prudent to, just have a webinar like this to go through some of those common questions, right? And the reality is, Social Security, super complex. There's over 3,000 rules out there related to Social Security. So I'm not going to be able to cover everything in 30 minutes. I'm just going to try to hit at a high level some of the main points that I think are valuable for our client base and some of the questions that we get a lot, right? So the whole premise of today, right, is to talk about more so collection of Social Security benefits, because all of us are paying into the system, right? And most of us have already done all of the hard work. We've been paying in the system for 10, 20, 30 years. So once you get to that point, really, it's about making sure that you are doing everything you can to maximize your benefit and making an informed decision, right? Because I'd hate for anyone to pay into a system for 30 plus years and then not get the most out of it just because they didn't exactly know some things to think about, right? So I'm going to first go into here and, ultimately this webinar is about, who should claim what benefit when and how much you'll actually receive. And what I thought would be helpful first is actually talking about how Social Security is calculated as a whole. And it's a pretty complex calculation. So I'm not going to explain it all into depth, but essentially what I want you to understand is there's a few pieces to this, and really there's a few abbreviations that I want you to get a feel for. The first one is something called PIA, or primary insurance amount. And your PIA is your benefit, so your Social Security benefit that you are entitled to at your full retirement age, or they call it FRA. And for a lot of people on this call, your full retirement age is probably 67. That's what it is for me. But for some folks, it can range, right? So if you're born in the 40s or 50s, it could be on a sliding scale from 60 all the way up to 60, or 66 all the way up to 66 in 10 months. And how they go about calculating this benefit is they take up to 35 years of earnings history, right? So think about your entire working life. They'll take up to 35 years. And what they'll do is they'll take every year, they'll adjust it for inflation. So previous years aren't, not as impactful as current years. And they'll take your average earnings over your lifetime. And then they'll divide that by 12 and they'll get the average index monthly earning, or AMI. That's another abbreviation I want you to be familiar with. I'll mention it a few more times. And your AMI is really the starting place for calculating your benefit. Okay. So a common question I get is, well, what if I don't have 35 years of earnings history? Is that going to impact my plan? And the answer is yes, but probably not as impactful as you might think. And I'll get to that in just a second. But to give you an example, like let's say someone retires earlier, or they take some years off from the workforce, and they only have 25 years of earnings history. Well, those 10 years that you weren't working, they get added into the calculation as zero. So they can weigh down your average. And then, what they do is they use what Social Security calls as bend points. So what these bend points are, and this is where it can get a little bit more complex and confusing. So I have a little bit of an example here. But essentially what Social Security says is that they say, hey, we know and recognize that lower income earners, chances are they can't save and invest as much as high income individuals. And so they're more reliant on their Social Security benefit than your higher income individuals. And so what they do to kind of account for this is they create these bend points where the first money that you pay in, right, that is weighed more heavily than future dollars. So these bend points, you can see they're breaking out into 3 tiers, okay? You got tier 1, where the first $1,000 of your Amy has a replacement rate of 90%, okay? So that $1,000 has much more of an impact to your PIA, as you can see on the right-hand side, than let's say tier 2, which is any income in between those two thresholds, the 1,100 to 6,700, okay? And that only has a 32% replacement rate. And then tier 3, which you can see there, right, that has an even lower replacement rate of 15%, and that goes up to that cap of $12,427. So a lot of people probably know this, but maybe not, but your earnings are capped for Social Security. So you can earn up to $165,000 a year, and after you reach that threshold, they'll no longer tax you for Social Security. So that's why you see that, you know, on the end, the maximum Amy you could have is that 12,000 figure. Okay. So, you know, in looking at this, really the main takeaway here is the first few, you know, couple $1,000s of your income are weighted much heavier than the future dollars. So a lot of people don't really know that. And, you know, to kind of further illustrate this a little bit and talk about, you know, planning for this as a retiree and calculating your benefit, well, what I want you to try to take away is the higher your income, the more responsibilities on your shoulders to replace your pre-retirement income in retirement. And I'll give you a couple examples here. So person A right here, you know, has on average earned about 100 grand a year. And so their Amy came out to $8,500. Well, based off of those bend points, and I've already done the math for you, you can see that his monthly benefit, you know, is a little over $3,000. And that, you know, I'm sorry, I'm gonna move my faces so I can see that. That's about 36% of his income now. So he can count on 36% of his income to be replaced by Social Security. In comparison to person B, who has been maxing out their Social Security benefits every year, even though they're paying more into the system, as a percentage of their income, right, they're only covering 27%. And so, you know, again, main takeaway here, your higher your income, the more it falls on your shoulders. And I can show this in person C, right? Because they cap it at 165, person B and person C, even though they make a massive amount different in income, you can see their Amy's the same and their benefit or PIA at full retirement age is the same. But person C, who has $400,000 in income that they're trying to replace in retirement, well, only Social Security is only going to cover 11% of that. So these bend points are important. And that's one main principle that I wanted to just talk about, because I get a lot of questions on, you know, how's my benefit calculated? If I stop working, is it going to impact my plan? But at the end of the day, you know, the first few dollars are the most important. And because it's based off of 35 years, you know, a few years that you might miss isn't going to dramatically impact your Social Security benefit. So shifting gears just a little bit, you know, a lot of questions I get is, yeah, my full retirement age is 67, but I can take it at 62, can I? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can. You can take it at 62, you can take it at 67, you can take it all the way up and wait until 70. And so this is honestly one of the most important pieces on collecting your Social Security benefits that you need to factor when making your decision. And so what I did here is I created a little bit of a case study with Jane Smith, and these are actual real numbers. And to start, what if Jane were to take it at 62? What are the implications? What does her benefit look like? Well, if she starts at 62, Jane would have about $2,600 a month in Social Security benefits. So she'd have that, she'd lock it in, and she'd have that the rest of her life. However, that is a permanent decision and irrevocable. You can't go back and change it after the fact. And because you take it early, Social Security says, well, we're not going to give you your full PIA because you're taking it early. We're going to reduce your first year's benefit. So on average, that's about a 30% reduction in your benefit over your lifetime. And in addition to that, not only do you get that kind of penalty by taking it early, you also are limited in your ability to continue working and earn income in retirement. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more here in a second. But, when it comes to electing your benefit, what are some reasons why someone might take it at 62? And there's really only two reasons that, I would ever recommend a client take it early. The first one is if it is like an emergency, they can't continue to work past 62 and they have no other income sources. And they have to tap into Social Security because that's what's going to help them put food on the table and keep the lights in the house. So Social Security kind of meant 62 to be as kind of an emergency situation for folks who need the money, right? So that's example number one. Example number two, and you'll see here that break even in early 70s. So you can do a break even calculation and you can say, okay, how long do I have to live to make up for those years that I missed out if I were to wait until 67 or 70? And if you took it at 62, that break even is around your early 70s. Okay, so if I had a client or I was engaging with someone and they said, hey, my longevity is compromised, I know for a fact I'm not going to live into my 70s. Well, that's a clear indicator that we need to start taking that Social Security benefit as quick as possible and get as much out of it as we can. But 9 times out of 10, taking it early is usually fairly penal and ends up with you collecting less Social Security benefits over your lifetime. So, a lot of people will look at, okay, well, what if I take it at 67? And at that point in time, there's really no penalties. There's no limitations on you working in retirement. And you can see for Jane, by waiting those additional, 5 or so years, she collects now, instead of $2,600, she collects $3,800. So she gets $1,200 more every month for the rest of her life just because she waited those 5 years. And if she lives until her early 70s, it would have made waiting worth it. So at the very least, our office will say, hey, let's try to wait to 67. And we can even use some of the investments on the front end of your retirement to get you there, right? And we'll model that. But, at the end of the day, a lot of people will not only wait till 67, but they'll potentially push it back all the way till 70. So when can waiting until 70 make sense? Well, first of all, you're going to get an increase in that benefit. The Social Security office says for every year you wait past your full retirement age, we will increase your first year benefit by 8% guaranteed, right? So for Jane, right, she, by waiting 3 additional years, now has a benefit of about $4,800. And again, similar to taking it at 62 versus 67, you can calculate a break-even point for waiting until 70. Now, there's some considerations like spousal protection I'm going to talk about here in a second, but for the most part, for most people, that break-even is your early 80s. Now, again, one other piece that we look at when we're analyzing Social Security is it also gives you some increased flexibility for income planning. And what happens is when you retire and your wages go away, you no longer have a steady set income source, and you have some more flexibility on where you pull your income from. So most people, you really have three buckets. You have maybe a pension if you're lucky enough to have one of those. You have Social Security, and then hopefully you've saved and invested some that you can utilize as well. So for our clients who do have a good variety of investments, what happens is we can use from the day that they retire until their Social Security benefit kicks in and RMDs, required minimum distributions, in your 70s. We can use those years as kind of golden tax planning years, where we can strategically pull from accounts to minimize your lifetime tax bill, right? So no one wants to pay Uncle Sam more than they have to. Giving us some more windows to play around with can be really valuable. And that's another reason why people will wait until 70. But I mentioned the spousal protection. And so I wanted to just quickly go through that because, our office, we work, a ton with families and couples. And so as a couple, a married couple, you have benefits that single people do not have. And so what are those benefits? And there's really two main benefits. The first one, which you can see here, is called your spousal benefit. And essentially what this is if you are married for at least a year and your spouse is collecting benefits, you are eligible for up to 50% of that spouse's benefits, regardless of how much your benefit is. Okay. So another example to kind of explain this is, let's say I give you Jan and Jack. Jack, a little bit more of a free spirit, hasn't been very career driven, hasn't earned a lot over his lifetime, and therefore has a PIA of $1,500. Okay. Well, in comparison, his wife, Jan, she's kind of the rainmaker. She's a bit of a baller, and she's had a great career where she's maxed out her benefit. So her benefit is $4,000. Well, because Jack was lucky enough to marry Jan, Jack not only gets to claim his benefit, but he also gets what they call a spouse top off, where they will give him his benefit of $1,500 plus what is equal to 50% of Jan's benefit. So you can see in this example, Jack gets, instead of $1,500, he gets $2,000 just because he's married to Jan. And even if Jack had never worked, he never earned a penny in his life, he would still receive $2,000 in Social Security benefits. Okay. So, that's a big perk for married couples, but, one of the bigger topics when it comes to spousal benefits is the survivorship benefit. So this is important in what I talked about when you're claiming your benefits and timing the claiming of your benefits, because what happens is one spouse typically earns more than the other spouse. Rarely do we see each spouse earn the exact same amount of money. And so usually there's a higher income earning spouse. And this becomes especially important when you have that discrepancy. Okay. So let's again give you the example of Jan and Jack. Let's say Jan unfortunately passes away. Well, Jack before was only getting $2,000 in benefits each month. But now, because he is the survivor of the couple, of the family unit, he either gets to collect his benefit or her benefit. So 100%, not 50% of her benefit. So now, instead of getting $2,000 a month, Jack now gets $4,000 a month, right? So what this means is when we're timing our benefits, when there is a discrepancy with a higher income spouse and a lower income spouse, you not only have to factor in your life expectancy, but also the life expectancy of your spouse. Okay, so I have a little chart that will kind of illustrate this a little bit, but this is that break even, right? And so let's say in that example that I just mentioned with Jan and Jack, Jan works her whole life, she pays into the system, and she goes until 70. She waits and doesn't claim her benefit until 70. And then something happens and she dies at 70 in one day. She never gets to claim her Social Security benefit. Well, because Jack gets that spousal benefit, as long as he lives until 82, the break even still holds. Okay. So when we're factoring in, hey, when should I collect my benefit? We not only should think about our longevity, but we should think about our spouse's longevity as well. So as long as one of us lives until our 80s, sometimes it can make a ton of sense for that higher income or earning spouse to wait until 70. And the reality is too, if you look at probabilities and longevity, if you have a couple who does retire and they're at Social Security age, the chances that one of them are going to live into their 80s is well over 90%. So, things to think about. Of course, no one has a crystal ball, but at the end of the day, when we're looking at making this decision, what I want to try to really affirm to you guys is that it's on a case by case basis, right? There's situations where taking it at 62 makes sense. There's situations where taking it at 67 makes sense, and there's situations where taking it at 70 makes sense. And luckily for you guys, you have our office at your disposal. So leverage us, right? And we have these conversations all the time, because I can't just say, oh yeah, everyone should take it at 70, because that's just not the case. And it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Okay. So a couple other things just to think about when we're looking at Social Security benefits. I mentioned if you take it early at 62, you are limited in the amount of money that you can earn in retirement. And that cap is set at, for this year, $21,240. So if you take it at 62 and you continue to work, and let's say, through some part-time work or whatever, you earn $31,000 in that year, in addition to your Social Security benefit. Well, Social Security is going to say, I don't think so. I am going to start to penalize you and take away part of your benefit. So every dollar you earn, they take 50 cents on the dollar from your Social Security. So in that example of $10,000, you're going to miss out on $5,000 in Social Security benefits. And unfortunately, a lot of people take it early, don't know this, and then get penalized as they continue to work. And they can't reverse the decision. They can't do anything about it, and it creates a situation that's not so great. So that's something I wanted to mention and keep in mind. As we're talking about penalties, right? Taxes, all of us see that as kind of a penalty, a little bit of a fee, and no one likes taxes. So how are Social Security benefits taxed? Well, on the federal level, it's kind of a tiered system. So again, similar, they're trying to help out lower income individuals. So if you are really low income and you're only getting Social Security benefits, chances are there's not going to be any taxes on those benefits. But for the most part, most of us are making over that 32,000 if you're married, or 25,000 if you're single. And I would say 9 times out of 10, when I'm looking at someone's tax return or Social Security benefits, about 85%, they fall in that bottom threshold where 85% of their Social Security benefits are taxed. So, don't ask me how they got to that number, where they'll give you like a 15% freebie. There's no really logic in the tax code, but they said, hey, since some of this is a return of your money, we won't tax you on all of it. I would argue it should be a little bit more. But at the end of the day, that's the taxes on the federal level. And on the state side, one of the benefits, as most of us on this call are Virginia residents, and this extends to some other states as well. So if you want to check on that, you feel free to shoot me a message. But your Virginia taxes, Social Security benefit is not considered taxable income. So that's one of the benefits of living in Virginia. You don't have to pay taxes on Social Security. So save the best for last. What about the current state and future of Social Security? And I think when it comes to Social Security, there are a lot of misconceptions that I see where people hear headlines notifying them that, the trust fund, right, or that reserves that Social Security has is going to run out of money. And at that point in time, most people think, well, if it runs out of money, all my Social Security benefits are going to go away, right? And that's not necessarily the case. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about this briefly, but you can see this chart shows that those asset reserves that have been building for the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years, they are starting to fall. And we are not on a sustainable path. More money is coming out of Social Security than what is coming in, and we only have these reserves that will last so long. So the most recent projections is that those reserves will be fully depleted between 2033 and 2035. Okay. And, again, like I said, the reason behind this is pretty simple. Back when it was first established in its early days, you can see in 64, right, for every one beneficiary or recipient of Social Security, there were 4 workers paying into the system. So that's how the reserves were able to grow and accumulate. But now, as baby boomers are retiring and cultural changes have happened, right? We're not having as many kids. There's just fewer workers in the workforce. You can see that that has been cut to now 2.7 and is only projected to go down from here, right? So, the reality is, again, we're on this unsustainable path, but let's say Social Security cuts off, the reserves deplete in 2035. Well, we still have people paying into the system, so we still have revenues that can pay current retirees. It's just not going to be enough. And so what could that potentially look like? Well, you'll see here, if we were to make some changes now, there's really 2 ways that we could change Social Security. One is increase taxes on current workers because there's not enough workers anymore, or we can cut benefits for retirees, okay? If we were to increase taxes, and we were to do it now, we'd have to increase our taxes by about 27% on the working population. Or conversely, cut benefits for retirees by about 21%. So if we're thinking about this, if worst case scenario, the reserves are fully depleted, right? You're looking at a benefit cut potentially of about 20 to 25%. So chances are it's not going to go all the way. I mean, I can't say guarantee, but I can pretty much guarantee it won't go all the way. But what's lucky for a lot of people on this call is that anytime they've made a change in the past, they've grandfathered in everyone over 55 and above. So they know and they recognize that 55 plus community, those are the voters, and they want to get reelected. And 2, they know that once you are at retirement age, there's only so much you can do to go back to work and save more and so on and so forth. So, the reality is Congress knows what they have to do. They just don't want to do it because they're more focused on tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. And 10 years out, that's a lifetime to them. They don't even know if they'll still be in office at that point. And so, my guess is it's probably not going to get addressed anytime soon. They're just going to keep kicking the can down the road. And then once we finally reach a breaking point, that's where we'll see some changes. But this chart shows that, as per usual, Congress procrastinating and pushing off the inevitable, it's going to cost us taxpayers. So if we wait till 2035 when it all goes away, we not only have to pay more in taxes, but benefits could potentially have to be cut even more. So, that's a high level view of Social Security. Again, we only had 30 minutes, so I tried to get through it as quick as possible. But, ultimately, again, what I want you to take away from here, right, is, and I'm going to skip a lot of this, but try to use our office to make the best decision for you and your family and maximize, you see that bottom, maximize your probability of success in your financial goal plan, right? That's ultimately what it comes down to. And so our office is here to help in any way that we can. And with that, I guess I'll leave it open for questions. I'm not sure if anything came in the chat box as we were going through it, but appreciate everyone's time. And one other quick thing, if you have a time stop, I know we're right at 12:30, so if you only budgeted 30 minutes, feel free to jump off. If you'd like to stay on for another 10 or so minutes, feel free to, and we'll open it up for some questions.
Thank you,
Right.
Cooper. It was a lot of information. I know that at the very end there, you went over some charts on what you think will happen, but curious, you're younger than I think all of us on this call too, so it's something I'm sure you've thought about. So what changes do you think will happen in the future? What's your opinion?
Yeah, it's a good question. My guess is it's probably going to be a mix of both. And how they're going to change the benefits or cut the benefits is they're probably going to push the age back. So right now it's at 67. I would guess that it's probably going to get pushed to potentially up to 70, maybe not quite as much. And then what I'm guessing they're probably going to do is they're probably going to increase taxes by taking away that wage base cap, right? So higher income earners are paying more into the system. That just seems to be how Congress has been trending as a whole. So my guess is, they won't want to put it on one population versus the other. They're going to want to try to do a mix of two, and they're probably going to target higher income earners before they target lower income earners.
Pat, did you have a question?
I do. So y'all know my situation, but we got multiple people on the call. I'm in a situation where my husband medically retired at 58, I think. And so I'm the higher breadwinner. So one thing I had when you were talking about the timing to collect
Mm-hmm.
and going 65 versus 70, 62 to 70. One thing you mentioned something about that when I retire, he would get an added benefit depending on my income?
Yeah, you would.
Oh, okay. I never would have thought to look into that. I'm sure that's something I'll have to ask when I do start collecting. But that's only if I work till what age?
So it doesn't matter how long you work. It just, as long as you are collecting Social Security benefits, so that's the one requirement. You have to be on your own Social Security benefits for your spouse to claim their spousal benefit as well. So, if you
So whether
retired
I'm
at 62,
65 or 70,
yeah, it
doesn't matter. Okay. Listening to this, y'all are convincing me more to wait till 70 to collect.
Yeah, I mean,
very
again,
informative.
It's just making the best decision for you. No one has a crystal ball, right? I can't tell you for sure, but we can look at the numbers and the math and give you all that, and then you make the decision that you feel is best and that you can sleep with.
Another question, actually, if you're currently on disability at 66, does it change to regular Social Security at 67? And then does the percentage change?
It does, yes. So one thing I didn't have time to go through was disability coverage. Social Security also has a disability coverage option, right? Where if something happens to you, they will pay benefits. Usually it's a fairly small benefit for most people, and it's also very hard to qualify for that benefit. But if you are on disability and you do have earnings history, right? You can either have your disability benefit or you can have your Social Security benefit. You can't have them both. So once you reach 67, what you want to do is take a look at, okay, what is my PIA and what is my disability? And if my PIA is higher, then I want to switch to that benefit and stop taking my disability benefit.
Just real quick, Cooper, back to that example you had with the Jack and Jan, just so I understood, the spousal benefit, both are still alive, but the spouse who makes less is entitled to more based on what the higher income earner is receiving. That's the formula.
Yeah, so it depends on the situation, right? So for you, Brian, if Cindy's Social Security benefit is less than half of yours, well, then she would want to switch over to yours and take half of yours, right? But if,
Okay.
like, let's say your benefit is 4,000 and hers is 2,500, it wouldn't make sense for her to claim 2,000 in benefits, so she already has that and then some from her own benefit.
So that was the catch. Then if the spouse is less than half, you'd probably be looking at that. But if they're greater than half, then it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Cooper, what about in the case that people have like a big age gap? So the second spouse that makes less, they would have to wait until they reach retirement age.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that actually makes it increasingly more important for the older individual to really weigh their decision and consider all factors. Because if something happens, right, let's say you have a 15-year age gap and the older individual dies at 75 and the younger individual is 60. Well, they can start to collect their survivorship benefit as early as 60. So because they waited until 70 and they started collecting their benefits, well, now that spouse who's now 60 gets to have the higher benefit for the rest of her life. So, something to definitely think about. And if you are in a situation like that, that's a little bit more unique, but happy to have a conversation related to that. And anyone here who has ever worked with the Social Security office will probably tell you they're terrible to deal with. You're on hold for hours. It takes months to get an appointment with them or process anything. So, if you're close to getting to full retirement age or you're close to claiming your benefits, you want to get ahead of the curve and actually submit ahead of time. So, there's not a delay like, you would expect with government workers. I have seen on multiple occasions Social Security get the individual's income or earnings history wrong, or they'll put a zero or they'll put a wrong number and it'll skew down your benefit. And if you're not going behind and checking and making sure that they got your numbers correct, you could have a lower benefit that wasn't your fault, it is Social Security fault. So what you can do is when you download your statement, it also will include an earnings history, and you can just confirm and make sure, okay, yes, I earned that amount and that year. Our office, whenever we get those statements, we'll check it and just make sure there's not anything outrageous. But sometimes we don't know if that it's off by a little. We'll only see major differences. Cool. All right. Well, with that, I think we will end it. Again, we appreciate everyone taking the time out of your day. We're going to try to do more of these educational webinars. I think we're going to try to do about quarterly or so. But feel free to share with anyone and everyone that you think could get value out of this, and hopefully we'll be able to see you guys on the next one.